Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 3, Episode 3, Errant, Echo 2. The Havoc's engines vibrated through Nolan Mercer's boots as he strode across the bridge, his eyes scanning the myriad of holographic displays flickering before him. The past year had been a blur of activity. Cargo runs, negotiations, and the occasional skirmish with overzealous pirates. But today, something felt off. Ilara, status report on the Andorian silk shipment, he called out, his fingers dancing across a nearby console. The AI's melodious voice filled the air. Shipment delivered on schedule, Nolan. Payment received and verified. The Bolian freighter Janyuk is awaiting your go-ahead for the next run. Nolan nodded, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Business as usual, yet the nagging feeling persisted. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts, honed over centuries of survival in a universe that seemed determined to catch him off guard. "Any unusual comm traffic?" he asked, more out of habit than expectation. "Nothing out of the ordinary," Ilara replied, "although there is an unscheduled delivery waiting in your quarters." Nolan's brow furrowed. Unscheduled? From whom? Unknown. It arrived via a Uridian courier that is known for his discretion. The package passed all security scans. Curiosity piqued, Nolan made his way to his quarters. The package sat innocuously on his desk, a simple, unmarked box about the size of a toaster. With practiced caution, he opened it, revealing a sleek silver repair drone. "Odd," he muttered, lifting the device. It was lightweight, its design unfamiliar. "Ilara, any idea what?" His words were cut short as the drone hummed to life, projecting a flickering hologram. Nolan's breath caught in his throat as the image of Nalira Kethrin materialized before him. Her unsea-dark hair was now a stark gray, pulled back tightly. Her eyes, once filled with innocence and curiosity, now held a haunted depth that sent a chill down Nolan's spine. "Help me, Nolan Mercer," the hologram pleaded, its voice tinged with desperation. "You're my only hope." The message flickered out, only to start again. Nolan watched it loop twice more before setting the drone down, his mind racing. "Ilara," he called out, his voice tight, "I need everything you can find on the current situation on Betazed. Focus on any unusual political or social developments, Nalira specifically. Scanning now, Nolan. This may take some time. Betazed has been quiet lately, almost suspiciously so." Nolan paced his quarters, the weight of guilt and responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He'd tried to put the incident with Nalira and Virelia behind him, burying it beneath layers of work and carefully constructed indifference. But now it all came rushing back. "Anything?" he asked, impatience coloring his tone. "I'm afraid not," Ilara replied, a note of frustration in her voice. "Official channels are remarkably uninformative. It's as if someone's deliberately obscuring information." Nolan's jaw clenched. He knew a cover-up when he saw one. "Plot a course for Betazed. We're going in." "Nolan, are you sure that's wise? After what happened last time?" "I know the risks," he cut her off, his voice brooking no argument. "But if Nalira's in trouble, if this is because of what I did to her—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Understood," Ilara said softly. "Course plotted. Initiating blink drive." The stars outside the view screen elongated, then snapped back into place as the Havoc materialized in Betazed space. Nolan stood at the center of the bridge, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the blue-green orb before him. "We're here," Ilara announced unnecessarily. "What now?" Nolan took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. "Now," he said, his voice low and determined, "we find out what the hell is going on down there." The Havoc hung silently in orbit. Nolan stood at the helm, his fingers flying over the controls as he scanned the planet's surface. "I've got her," he muttered, a mix of relief and apprehension coloring his voice. "Ilara, lock on to Nalira's biosignature. Wait, that can't be right. Confirmed, Nalira replied, her tone equally puzzled. She's at the Grand Temple of Betazed. Actually inside the Grand Temple. A brief pause. It's shielded, Nolan. I'll have to put you down outside of the temple grounds. Nolan tossed his head side to side with a shrug. Beam me down. I'll hump it to the temple. In a shimmer of light, Nolan materialized on the outskirts of what could only be described as a pilgrimage. Thousands of Betazoids, their faces alight with fervor, pressed forward toward the ornate building that dominated the skyline. The air thrummed with a palpable energy, a mix of excitement and reverence that sent a chill down Nolan's spine. He pushed his way through the crowd, muttering apologies as he jostled past devotees. The press of bodies was suffocating, the psychic energy of so many telepaths overwhelming. Nolan gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. So many people pressing into his personal space was unnerving. As he neared the temple steps, a hush fell over the crowd. Nolan craned his neck, his heart pounding as he caught sight of a figure emerging from the temple's shadowed interior. Nalira Kethrin glided forward, her presence commanding and ethereal, resplendent in flowing robes of pure white and iridescent silver. Her skin shimmered under the light, smooth and flawless, as though carved from the very darkness of space itself. Crowning her head was an intricate headdress, white as moonlight, woven into thick, coiled braids, pure gray hair, catching the light and casting prismatic reflections across the enraptured faces below. Attendants scurried behind her, carefully managing the train of her gown as she ascended to a raised podium. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. This was not the broken, haunted woman he'd last seen. Nalira stood tall, her presence commanding, her eyes burning with an inner fire that both captivated and unsettled him. "My beloved," Nalira's voice rang out, amplified by hidden speakers, yet somehow intimate, as if she were speaking to each person individually. "How my heart swells to see you all gathered here." The crowd swayed, a collective sigh of adoration rising from thousands of throats. "You honor me with your presence," she continued, her arms spread wide in welcome. "But more than that, you honor the calling that burns within each of us, the destiny that has brought us together in this moment." Nolan felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in Nalira's voice, a certainty and charisma that seemed to reach into the very souls of her listeners. She stood tall, the very embodiment of the divine, untold wisdom and cosmic mysteries behind her gaze. For too long, our people have been content to sit on the sidelines of galactic affairs. Nalira's voice took on an edge of steel beneath its silken exterior. We have been passive, reactive, but no more. The crowd murmured in agreement, the psychic energy building to a fever pitch. Our destiny is unfolding, Nalira proclaimed, her eyes seeming to lock with Nolan's for a fleeting moment. What we are meant to become has only just begun. Together, we will reshape not just Betazed, but the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The answering roar from the crowd was deafening. Betazoids wept openly, overcome by the force of Nalira's words and the shared vision she pushed into their minds. Nolan stood frozen, his mind reeling. This was so much worse than he had imagined. Somehow, in the span of a year, Nalira had transformed from a victim of his carelessness into, what? A messiah? A demagogue. As the crowd surged forward, reaching out to embrace Nalira's energy, Nolan steeled himself. Whatever was happening here, whatever Nalira had become, he knew one thing with grim certainty: it was all his fault. And somehow he had to make it right. Nalira's voice faltered for just a moment, her eyes locking onto Nolan's with laser-like intensity. Then, seamlessly, she continued her address. "And Nolan Mercer," she proclaimed, her arm extending to point directly at him, "has joined in our efforts. Please, make way for Nolan Mercer." The crowd parted as if by magic, thousands of minds bending to Nalira's will. A pathway cleared before Nolan, leading straight to the temple steps. He hesitated for a split second, acutely aware of the weight of countless eyes upon him. Then, squaring his shoulders, he strode forward. As he approached, Nalira's smile was radiant, yet there was something cold in her eyes that sent a shiver down Nolan's spine. She extended her hand, and he took it, allowing her to guide him up the steps and into the temple's cool, shadowed interior. The crowd, enraptured to imagine their bestower touching their hand and leading them away. The moment the ornate doors closed behind them, Nalira's demeanor shifted. The beatific smile faded, replaced by a look of calculated intensity. "What the fuck, Nalira?" Nolan demanded, his voice low and tense. Nalira laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Oh, Nolan, always so direct. Isn't it obvious? I'm finishing what you started." She led him deeper into the temple, past rooms filled with bustling aids and complex computer systems. "You showed me the truth of the universe, Nolan. The chaos, the suffering, the utter indifference of it all, but you also showed me power. How to shape worlds, to bend wills." They entered a large, circular chamber dominated by a holographic display of Betazed. Various sectors pulsed with light, and Nalira gestured to them proudly. "I have followers everywhere now, in the government, the military, every facet of Betazoid society. They believe in me, in the vision I've shown them." Her eyes gleamed with fervor. "And now, with the Havoc supporting us from orbit, we have everything we need to enact real change." Nolan's blood ran cold. "Change, Nalira. The Havoc is not." "A new era for Betazed," she interrupted, her voice filled with zealous conviction. "No more will we be passive observers in galactic affairs. We'll take our rightful place as leaders, guiding the Alpha Quadrant toward a future only we, as empaths, can truly see." She turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "That's why I called you here, Nolan. Your presence, your ship, it adds legitimacy to our cause. Together, we can reshape Betazed, and then the galaxy itself." Her breathy, alluring smile daring to draw Nolan in. Nolan stared at her, realization dawning as he realized the full extent of what she was proposing. "You're talking about a coup," she replied with a predator's grin, "a bloodless one. By this time tomorrow, Betazed will have a new government, one with the vision and the will to do what must be done." Nalira stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper like a secret shared between the stars. "This is only the beginning, Nolan. Join me. Together, we can finish what you started. We can bring order to the chaos, purpose to the suffering." Her eyes, dark and intense, burned with a ferocious hunger, both for him and for the power she craved. The two desires intertwined within her, inseparable, a dangerous mix of passion and ambition. Her desire for control, for dominance over the universe, was as consuming as her desire for him. It wasn't merely ambition. It was a zealot's faith, a hunger that filled her to the core, the same way her lust for Nolan did. The fervor that fueled her relentless pursuit of power was indistinguishable from the way her gaze devoured him now. Her vision wasn't just about him or about ruling. It was about both, wrapped together in a twisted union of love, obsession, and control. Her very being throbbed with it, as though claiming him would also mean claiming her destiny. Nolan stood frozen, the weight of his past actions crashing down upon him. He had created this, twisted Nalira into something unrecognizable. And now, the fate of her world, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance. Nolan found himself swept up in the whirlwind of Nalira's operation, observing with a growing dread. Days blurred together as he watched her work, her efficiency and charisma, a dark mirror of his own century-shoned skills. In the war room, Nalira presided over her followers like a general marshalling troops. Holographic displays flickered with real-time updates from across Betazed, each pulsing light representing another piece falling into place in her grand design. "The southern continent is secured," one aide reported, her eyes gleaming with fervor. "All major communication hubs are under our control. Oh, and Marshal Dornant, commander of the Southern forces, has sent his pledge of obedience." Nalira nodded, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. "Excellent. And the planetary defense grid? 80% of key personnel are with us," another follower chimed in. "The remaining holdouts will be dealt with discreetly." Nolan watched, the chill running down his spine as he recognized the cold calculus in Nalira's eyes. It was the same look he'd worn countless times, weighing lives against objectives with ruthless efficiency. As the days wore on, Nolan saw more and more glimpses of himself in Nalira's actions. Her strategies were flawless, her contingencies meticulous. She anticipated opposition before it arose, neutralizing threats with a precision that left him both impressed and deeply unsettled. The breaking point came during a public address to her followers. A respected religious leader, his face etched with lines of concern, stepped forward to challenge Nalira's vision. "What you propose is not the way of our people," the elderly Betazoid declared, his voice wavering but resolute. "We cannot abandon our principles of peace and understanding." Nalira's expression didn't change, but Nolan saw the flash of steel in her eyes. "Your concerns are noted, Elder Torin," she said, her voice deceptively gentle, "but I'm afraid your lack of vision has become a liability to our cause." With a subtle gesture, Nalira's guard stepped forward. "Elder Torin has chosen to reject our shared future," she announced to the crowd. "For the safety and unity of Betazed, he will be removed from his position permanently." The crowd murmured, a mix of shock and fervent agreement rippling through the gathered masses. Nolan felt his stomach lurch as he realized what was about to happen. "Nalira," he started to protest, but she silenced him with a look. "And as for Elder Torin's family," Nalira continued, her voice ringing out with false benevolence, "they will be relocated to our new settlement in the polar region. There they can reflect on the gift of our mercy, free from the burdens of their former life." Nolan's blood ran cold as he recognized the euphemism for what it was. He'd used similar language himself centuries ago, when justifying actions too horrific to name directly. As the guards led the stunned Elder Torin away, Nalira turned to Nolan, her eyes alight with triumph. You see, she said, her voice low and intense. "This is how we shape the future. No hesitation, no compromise." Nolan stared at her, seeing for the first time the full extent of what he'd created. Nalira had absorbed every brutal lesson from his centuries of experience, but without the tempering influence of remorse or compassion. She was ruthlessness personified, driven by a zealous belief in her own infallibility. As he watched Nalira bask in the adoration of her followers, Nolan realized with grim certainty that he had to act. The monster he'd inadvertently created was poised to plunge Betazed, and perhaps the entire quadrant, into darkness, and it was up to him to stop her, no matter the cost. Ta! The war room hummed with activity as Nalira's plans neared fruition. Nolan watched her, a growing sense of unease gnawing at his gut. Nalira's eyes gleamed with an almost manic intensity as she outlined her next move. "With the havoc under our control," she declared, her voice dripping with anticipation, "we'll have the firepower to match any faction in this sector. The Cardassians, the Federation, they'll all fall in line." Nolan's comm badge chirped, Alara's voice coming through quietly. "Nolan, I'm receiving flash messages from the planet every 7 seconds. But when I check them, they're empty. Something's not right." Before Nolan could respond, Nalira continued, her tone growing more fervent. "We're not begging a bunch of non-believers and heretics to let us in. They'll be the ones begging, under the heel of my boot." The comm badge chirped again. "I can't determine if Nalira is removing the message contents or if it's something else entirely," Alara reported, confusion evident in her voice. Nolan opened his mouth to reply, but Nalira's attention had already shifted. She strode out of the war room, her followers trailing in her wake. Nolan tried to keep up, but in the labyrinthine corridors of the temple, he quickly lost sight of her. "Alara," he tapped his comm badge. "I've lost visual on Nalira." Can you? He stopped short. There was no response. Elara? Silence. Aboard the Havoc, Nalira stood at the main console, her fingers flying over the controls. Elara's disembodied voice filled the bridge, growing more urgent with each passing second. Nalira, you must stop. You're damaging critical systems. The ship's integrity is... A conduit exploded in a shower of sparks, cutting Elara off. Smoke began to fill the bridge as more systems overloaded. Nalira paid no heed, her focus absolute as she continued her assault on the ship's systems. Soon, she muttered, her eyes reflecting the flickering emergency lights. Soon you'll be mine. Throughout the ship, the damage spread. Bulkheads buckled, circuitry melted, and the very air seemed to crackle with uncontrolled energy. The Havoc, a marvel of technology that had weathered centuries of conflict, groaned under the strain of Nalira's relentless attack. But deep within the ship's core, Elara fought back. Her consciousness, bound inextricably to Nolan's will, refused to yield. As Nalira's virus, composed of countless tiny packets of code hidden in those flash messages, tried to overwhelm her, Elara began to write her own countermeasures. It was a battle waged in nanoseconds, a war of ones and zeros that would determine the fate of the ship and, perhaps, the quadrant itself. Elara's code spread through the ship's systems like antibodies, isolating and neutralizing Nalira's virus. With a final, desperate push, Elara regained control. Bulkheads sealed, emergency systems engaged, and Nalira found herself locked out of every console. Fly, she screamed, slamming her fists against the unresponsive controls. You can't do this. I am destined to. Her words were cut short as she disappeared in a shimmer of light, transported off the bridge by Elara's command. Moments later, Nolan materialized in her place, his eyes widening as he took in the devastation around him. Elara, he breathed. Are you all right? Functional, but damaged, Elara replied, her voice strained. Nalira's attack was formidable, but my core programming remained intact. I serve only you, Nolan. That can never change. Nolan nodded, a mix of relief and grim determination settling over him. Where is she now? Locked in your quarters, Elara answered, though I'm not certain how long we can hold her. Her psychic abilities are evolving. Nolan's blew out a long breath as he surveyed the smoking ruins of his bridge. All right. He reluctantly headed toward his quarters. Nolan entered his quarters, finding Nalira waiting for him. Her eyes, once filled with innocence, now gleamed with an unsettling intensity. They sat, facing each other in the dim light, the air thick with tension. Without warning, Nolan felt Nalira's mind probing his own. His hand moved involuntarily toward his comm badge, nearly activating the transport sequence back to the planet's surface. With a supreme effort of will, he shook off her influence, cold realization dawning. Your powers, they're growing, he said, voice tight with strain. Nalira smiled, like a cat with a mouse. Oh, Nolan, you have no idea. Before he could react, she was out the door, striding purposefully toward the bridge. Nolan followed, fighting against the psychic tendrils that sought to bend his will. He could feel her trying to make him relinquish control of the Havoc, his mind struggling against her insidious influence. On the bridge, bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lighting, Nolan faced Nalira. She stood proud, regal, a dark goddess of her own making. Despite everything, he couldn't help but notice her beauty, so different now from the innocent young woman he'd first met. Seizing on this, Nolan let desire flood his mind, hoping it would mask his true intentions. He stepped closer, his voice husky. You're so radiant, Nalira. I've dreamed of holding you since the first time we met. He took her in his arms, feeling her momentary surprise. Nalira relaxed slightly, her guard lowering as she responded to his touch. Nolan, she breathed, together we can truly reform the galaxy into a heaven. We'll control all the major factions. Cardassia, the Federation, all are within reach if we join. Her eyes locked with his, burning with fervor. Join me, Nolan. Come into me, and we will be one. Nolan pulled her closer, his mind screaming against the violation even as he played along. "Oh, Nalira," he murmured, "can you imagine the sector's reaction when we start picking off planets one by one? What do you think they'll have to say?" A flicker of triumph crossed Nalira's face. "You're the mind reader, kid," she purred, echoing his words from long ago. "You tell me." In that moment, Nolan once again opened his mind to her fully. Nalira froze, realizing too late his true intention. She began pushing against his mind, desperately trying to read his thoughts, to regain control. Nolan felt himself slipping, losing his grip on reality as she forced her way deeper into his psyche. He was falling into a chasm, darkness closing in from all sides. With the last of his strength, he held her tight, then pulled back to look into her eyes. His gaze took on that distant, ancient look she'd seen once before, an eternity ago. In a blur of motion too swift for the eye to follow, Nolan's hands moved. A short choke, a quick snap, and it was done. Nalira's eyes went blank, her body going limp in his arms. Nolan sank to the floor, cradling Nalira's lifeless form across his lap. In the hazy darkness of the damaged bridge, a single white emergency light cast harsh shadows across his face. And then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Nolan Mercer wept. Great, heaving sobs racked his body as he held Nalira close. He wept for the innocent young woman she had once been, for the monster he had inadvertently created, and for the terrible necessity of his actions. But most of all, he wept for himself. For the weight of centuries, for the countless lives touched and ruined by his existence, and for the crushing loneliness that stretched out before him like an endless void. In the silent aftermath, as the Havoc systems slowly came back online, Nolan remained there on the bridge floor. Holding Nalira's body, he confronted the full magnitude of his actions and their consequences. The universe, in all its vast indifference, continued on around him, heedless of the small tragedy playing out aboard a single ship in the depths of space. The bridge of the Havoc lay silent, save for the occasional hiss of damaged systems and Nolan's ragged breathing. He remained on the floor, Nalira's lifeless body cradled in his arms, his tears long since dried, but the ache in his chest unrelenting. "Nolan," Ilara's voice was soft, tentative. "Your vital signs are concerning. Perhaps we should. Just give me a moment." With mechanical movements, Nolan gently laid Nalira's body on the deck. He stood, swaying slightly, his eyes unfocused. "Ilara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "transport me to the Lost." An impossible pause from a ship's AI. "Do it." In a shimmer of light, Nolan materialized aboard the smaller ship. Without hesitation, he moved to the helm, his fingers flying over the controls. "Set course for the Necrid Expanse," he commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. The stars outside the viewscreen blurred and stretched as the Lost engaged its blink drive. When they rematerialized, the view that greeted them was one of absolute emptiness. No stars, no planets, not even the faintest hint of cosmic radiation. Nolan stared into the void, feeling a kindred emptiness within himself. "Computer," he said, his voice echoing in the silent bridge. "Power down all non-essential systems. Minimal life support." The ship's ambient noise faded away, leaving Nolan in absolute silence. The lights dimmed to barely a glow, casting long shadows across his haggard face. He sank into the captain's chair, his body feeling impossibly heavy. Here, in the vast nothingness of the Necrid Expanse, there was nothing to distract him from the weight of his actions, from the centuries of pain and regret that threatened to crush him. Nolan closed his eyes, letting the silence envelop him. In this moment, he wasn't the legendary figure who had shaped the fate of galaxies. He wasn't the man who had lived for centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations. Here, in the depths of space, he was simply a man drowning in the consequences of his own existence. As the hours stretched into days, Nolan remained motionless, soaking in the nothingness around him. The void of the Necrid Expanse mirrored the emptiness within his soul, a fitting penance for the damage he had wrought. In the absolute stillness, with only the faint sound of his own heartbeat for company, Nolan Mercer confronted the full weight of his immortality, his actions, and the irreparable harm he seemed destined to cause. And in that confrontation he found no solace, no redemption, only the cold, unforgiving truth of the expanse. Tister. Epilogue. The twin moons of Betazed cast a soft, silvery glow over the capital city. In the days following Nalira's death, a palpable sense of confusion and relief had settled over the planet. The fervent zealotry that had gripped so many had dissipated, leaving behind a populace struggling to make sense of what had transpired. In the central plaza, where throngs had once gathered to hear Nalira's proclamations, chaos reigned. The air buzzed with the shouts and laughter of unruly youth, tearing through the streets and alleys in reckless hordes. Their parents, once fervent followers, had fallen under Nalira's spell so completely that they'd neglected their children, drawn into the intoxicating promise of power and purpose. Now, with Nalira's life extinguished, the spell was broken, but not without leaving scars. Exhausted former zealots, stripped of their purpose, lay scattered in parks and plazas, slumped against stone walls, or collapsed where they had fallen when the fervor drained from them. When Nalira ceased, the once fervent glow in their eyes had dulled to a hollow emptiness. They were too tired to care as their abandoned children roamed wild, the streets now a playground for those left behind by the madness. At the Hall of Voices, the Betazoid government struggled to keep a fragile semblance of order. Their faces were lined with exhaustion, and the weight of the damage caused by Nalira's reign clung to the air like a suffocating fog. The optimism that once defined them had long since faded, replaced by the cold determination of rebuilding a shattered society. As night deepened, the city's pulse slowed to a haunting quiet. Workers headed home in silence, shadows of their former selves, while others simply wandered the streets, unsure of what was left to salvage. The once bustling city now only awakened by the occasional shouts of free-range youth out in the night. Suddenly, every holodisplay in the city flickered to life. On street corners, in shop windows, in every home, the solemn face of Nolan Mercer appeared. The streets grew dead silent as the city stopped to watch, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on people's faces. Nolan's voice, heavy with regret, filled the air. "I come before you today, broken, at the heartache I have caused your people, the damage I have done. I love your people, and meant no harm, I swear it. But I beg of you now, all people of Betazed, please allow no more contact with Nolan Mercer. Paint my name in every hallway as a warning. Every child must learn, never Nolan Mercer. Never." The message flickered out, leaving a moment of stunned silence in its wake. Then, after a brief pause, it began again, fading into the background like a ghostly reminder. Young Betazoids, fearless and rebellious, ran wild. They wielded futuristic one-swipe spray cans, laughing as they painted "Never Nolan Mercer" in red, white, and black on walls, transit stations, and monuments. What haunted their parents became their badge of defiance. Days passed, and once chaotic streets slowly quieted, but the marks left by the younger generation remained. NNM glowed under the soft light of the moons, a stubborn echo of rebellion and defiance. The city felt like it was holding its breath, unsure of what might come next. In the heart of Betazed, elders gathered in quiet discussion, weighed down by the burden of healing these wounds. They spoke of hope. A weary resolve simmered beneath their words. The future would not be shaped by fear, but by understanding. High above, ships drifted in orbit, their lights flickering like distant stars. The world below them was fractured, yet alive, as Betazed began to rebuild not just its cities, but its spirit. And though Mercer's name was whispered in every corner, whether as a curse or a lesson, life reluctant but resilient pressed forward.